And now let's try and tune in to no good music from an undisclosed location somewhere in New Jersey.
She don't give a crap about her bad reputation.
He can't smile too much, right? Because he's trying to play saxophone.
Yeah. And then there's a guy with a deep voice every once in a while going, yeah. That was his only job.
And I was parking. I look up on a marquee, and there's my name.
He looked like he was out of a horror movie, and he was thinking of something devious.
I'm a rock and roll guy.
Hey everyone, this is Rob.
And Jeremy.
And we are on show 59. And today we are going to be reviewing, a little late, but, Dave Grohl's book, The Storyteller, Tales of Life and Music. And we're only going to be doing the review. So this is solely about the book. And we are having a beer. This is probably our third beer.
Yep. I'm not driving tonight, so.
Oh, yeah. Jeremy's staying over. We have, as we said in the last podcast, we got a show going. We're going to tomorrow, autograph show. I will be meeting John Lovitz, Jane Levy, her show, Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, which I've talked about, which is unfortunately canceled. I love that show. Katie Segal, and possibly McKenna Grace. And Jeremy, who you meeting?
Michael Ironside, Brad Dourif, possibly McKenna Grace, and then Dina Meyer is the other big one from Saw. From Saw, yep.
Yeah.
She was also in a movie called Bats, if you've never seen that. That was a good one.
I don't think I've seen that one, but I've seen the poster.
Well, I got it signed. So.
Oh, that's why I see it. Yeah.
I got Lou Diamond Phillips, who was the sheriff in Bats, to sign it. Dina's also in it, so.
We're going to, like I said, talk about Dave Grohl's book. We're going to go through, like we did with Brian Johnson's book, each chapter in some detail. There's like 23, 24 chapters. The book came out October 5th, 2021. So it did come out a couple of years ago. And we just got around to reading it, of course.
Oh, and it's good timing with, the anniversary of shocking events.
Yeah, Kurt Cobain's passing.
Yeah.
I always love Nirvana. And so I've been listening more. I can see it from here, Bleach, which Dave is not on. That was their first album. I still have to get In Utero. I had the CD, though, but anyway. So we'll talk a little bit about Nirvana. There is, of course, a section in the book. Well, there's a couple of chapters about his time in Nirvana. And after we're done going through the chapters, then we will give our opinion on the book. Or we may say some stuff in between, But first of all, there's no chapter numbers.
No.
I had to figure out.
The only breaks were when it went to a part, because there was like a part 2 and a part 3.
Yeah, there's like 5 parts to the book.
Yeah.
I think the book's like 374 pages, something like that. But I got a nice hardcover on eBay for like $8 or something like that.
Nice. This, we do a lot of the pre-sales for an autographed copy. Mm-hmm. And of course, this is one I didn't see or hear about.
Yeah, the Brian Johnson book we both got
years in advance.
And Peter Frampton, we may do that at some point. So the first part of the book is the introduction, and right away we get the feeling Dave is kind of just a regular dude who happened to be in one of the most famous bands of the 90s, and he's in another famous band, which is remarkable career. Mm-hmm. To have success, and especially starting out as a drummer and then a guitarist.
Yeah.
But I have here, I think he's famous, but low-key famous.
Yeah.
The book starts out where he's at the Hurricane Sandy relief concert in 2012. And he sees an old rock star who's perfectly dressed, very clean looking, and another one is wearing like a t-shirt, rock t-shirt, and he says pretty well road tested. So I was trying to figure out who these people are. I looked up the concert to see who was there.
Okay.
I think, believe it or not, the first person that's kind of clean is Bon Jovi.
Yep.
The second person I would say is Keith Richards.
Okay.
That's what I'm going with, because I know the Stones played. But Dave reflects on being an old rock singer, and he says he wants to grow old like a rusted hot rod. So we kind of gather that he's never going to get, Botox or...
Right.
So then we go to chapter 1, DNA Doesn't Lie. And I can say, now Jeremy listened to the audiobook. I read the book. So maybe I got a different feeling for the chapters because I realized he likes to start the chapter with sort of the ending of the chapter.
Yeah.
He'll start with something and then go into something totally different. But it always has to do with what he started with.
Yep.
Somehow. Dave's daughter, Harper, she's 8 years old. She wants to learn how to play the drums. And it's a good feeling. I know Jeremy doesn't have any children, but when your son or daughter comes to you and they want you to teach them something that you know.
Right.
So then Dave goes into him and his mom. I thought this was kind of strange, and I didn't really... Dave leaves out a lot of things, some details, because I don't think, right off the bat, you don't know where his father is.
Right.
Like he doesn't say he doesn't start out with I don't even think he tells you where he was born. Maybe he does. I don't know. He talks about his going with his mom to attend jazz workshops. Dad's not even
mentioned.
And I have here, correct me if I'm wrong, but we didn't find out till later in the book his father left
much later
when he was 6.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is actually a little strange, but kind of cool, because these sound like underground jazz clubs.
Yes.
Where people would just get together and jam. You'd write your name on a list, and if you thought you could play an instrument and join in. It kind of reminds me of when Pat DiNizio from the Smithereens would have these Memorial Day concerts in his backyard. You could actually put your name on the list and write down what song you wanted to sing. Most people just sang. They didn't have an instrument with them.
Right.
And they could get up on stage and do the song.
That's cool.
With the band, which was pretty cool. I don't know.
It reminded me of, if you've ever heard of an open mic.
Yeah.
A lot of bars do that, where you just sign up and, you go up and either sing or perform or do whatever. Yeah. That's kind of what it made me think of.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't have enough nerve or whatever to get up, except my wife went up there one time and my son was like 4, and my son tried to sing Top of the Pops with Pat.
Nice.
So he didn't care. But he did freeze up, I think, when he saw all the people. There were like 100 people there. So Dave decides to play drums at one of the jazz workshops. And I think it's his first performance in front of people. He meets a guy by the name of Lenny Robinson. And he wants to take drum lessons. Now, Lenny is charging $30 a lesson, which I think is pretty high at this time.
I think he said $30 an hour.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe that was the going rate.
Yeah, which is a lot.
Well, back in 1980, I took my first guitar lessons, and I don't know exactly, but I think it was like $10 a lesson. It might have been 30 minutes, so that might have been in the ballpark.
Okay.
And I looked up this guy. As far as I can tell, he's still alive, and he's played with some big names in jazz over the years.
Well, he made him sound like he was a jazz icon.
Yeah. Dave only had one lesson with Lenny, And he pointed out that Dave was holding the sticks wrong.
He was drumming with the fat part.
Yeah.
Instead of holding it.
And I don't know if Dave still does that or not.
No.
And he also talks about his other daughter, Violet, she is a singer, and I've seen her sing with the Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
So now we're on chapter 2, The Heartbreak of Sandy. Now, some of these chapters, there's not much going on. There's not much exciting things. This is probably one of them. This is about Dave's first love, Sandy, in 1982. Dave was 13. Now, some of this stuff I had to figure out.
Yeah.
It didn't say Dave was 13. A lot of times there were no years. I would have liked to have.
Yeah, he just says he was in high school. Like, it was his high school sweetheart. Or, equivalent of.
Now, they seem to have only dated a week or two.
Yeah.
And Dave got dumped by her. But interesting in this chapter is Dave has a dream. He's on stage playing drums in an arena. And there is Sandy standing front row watching him. Maybe he thinks in the dream, I'm assuming that he can win her back. Maybe he's thinking of revenge, or look at me, I'm up on stage.
Right.
You should have stayed with me. I'm surmising these things. I don't think he says this in the book. But fast forward to 2011, Dave gets a call from an old friend who asked to be put on their guest list for the show in D.C., and it's the Wasting Light tour. He tells Dave that he's bringing Sandy, who Dave has not seen since 1982.
Right.
So then Dave's up on stage, as in the dream. He claims that she's standing in the exact spot he dreamed in his dream. So that's just wacky stuff there. So that's basically the chapter.
Yep.
Chapter 3, The Scars Are on the Inside. This is all about Dave's injuries. And it sounds like he's been through a lot as you read this book, but not to be compared with Chuck Negron from Three Dog Night. If you read his book, you're like, after I got done with his book, I'm like, how is he even alive?
Yeah.
With some of the stuff. Car crash, almost going off a cliff in the car with his family. So there wasn't, in this book, there's not too many outrageous things.
No, they just pointed out, like, the doctor knew him on a first name basis. Because he was in there so often.
So Dave gets hit with a golf ball, and he's at his friend's house, and I think they're scared. I think they're driving balls in the backyard, and Dave is, obviously where he shouldn't be, gets hit in the head with a golf ball. They tell him he should go home because obviously they see that he is bleeding. Dave doesn't notice. Now, I don't know what 150 yards. What's a football field?
100 yards.
Yeah, 100. So a little bit more than a football field home.
I mean, it's actually like 120 when you factor in the end zones. But anyway.
So almost a little over a football field to go home. And at one point he looks down at his shirt and it's covered in blood. And he gets home, his mom's vacuuming. He opens the door and Mom, can you come here for a second? It's kind of an emergency. So he goes to the hospital. Apparently I don't know if he split open his head. I don't think he split open his skull. And I have here, maybe he was high on caffeine, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Come on. Justin, fresh pot!
Some other injuries. I don't know if it doesn't sound like he was intentionally injuring himself, but I think he looked forward to, like all kids would, staying home from school.
Yeah.
Then we get into, actually, this chapter has an amazing story. And it's when Dave broke his leg while performing in Gothenburg, Sweden.
Yep.
Now, if you go on YouTube, you can actually see the video. So Dave has his guitar. I don't know what song they're performing, or if they're actually about to perform a song. But you see Dave moving with his guitar towards the edge of the stage and trips over something. Yep. Completely falls off the stage with his guitar.
Yep.
So Dave breaks his ankle. Broke his leg, yeah. There's concrete. It's a concrete floor. Luckily, he didn't hit his head, and he could have died.
No, because I've seen this video. It's been a while, but I'm pretty sure he says something like, I'm pretty sure I just broke my fucking leg into the microphone.
Yeah, I think I broke my fucking leg or something like that.
Yeah.
The doctor comes over and some medical people, but Dave doesn't want the concert to end.
Right.
They're into the second song. That's it.
Yeah. And they play like 25.
And this is a arena where I think he mentions Bruce Springsteen, like a lot of people sold out concerts, and he's looking forward to playing this big arena.
Yep.
Now the hospital's 30 minutes away. He doesn't want to go to the hospital, but he needs a cast. So he convinces the doctor to send someone to the hospital and come back with the cast. And he tells the doctor, you're coming up on stage with me, because he has to hold his ankle, I think, the whole time.
Yep.
So the doctor's up there, and I didn't understand this, how they put a cast on him. Maybe they took him off stage, but he ended the concert.
Yeah.
And that kind of reminds me of some, I don't know names, but some, like I know there was a baseball player, was it Jim Tomei? Maybe it's coming to me. That had a bloody sock. Someone had a bloody sock.
Oh, that was Kurt Schilling.
Okay, yeah. And I think Donovan McNabb might have played with a broken ankle or something like that. People have played with broken fingers.
It was either him or Terrell Owens.
Okay.
One of them played through.
Yeah. So Dave could have just been like, I got to go to hospital and postpone the concert, but he didn't.
I texted you this, but I was actually at that tour. Not in Sweden.
Yeah.
But when they came to Michigan, I saw the Broken Leg tour.
Okay.
And I don't have a lot of regrets in life, but they had a t-shirt that they had made, and it was Dave Grohl with a cast on his leg.
Oh, okay.
And I regret not getting that shirt, because that would have been a cool memory.
It's probably worth something now.
Yeah. Because he sat in like a king throne the entire show. It was wild. But he still rocked out, and he still...
Yeah, he continued the tour.
Yeah, at points he would stand up and he'd be like, if only I could walk right now, you guys would be in,
Yeah.
Like, he was just so cool.
Mm-hmm.
And the show didn't suffer just because he had a broken leg.
Yeah, I think he's just someone that lives and breathes music, and this is my job, and...
Agreed.
I could still play guitar. I think even if he broke his arm or something, he probably still would have sang. Someone else play guitar. So in chapter 4, Tracy is a punk rocker. So Dave is introduced to punk. He goes to visit his mom's friend and her daughter Tracy in Illinois. Now, last time Dave saw Tracy, she was wearing shorts and a polo shirt. And now she's wearing Doc Martens. And I could have looked this up. I don't know what bondage pants are. That's what it said.
I didn't even catch on that.
Yeah. So she takes him to this small club to see this band called Naked Ray Gun. I get the idea that this may be Dave's first concert, because he makes a comment that he always thought a concert was like a big arena concert. Now Dave says, this is on page 58, this was a feeling of freedom that I had waited for my entire life, and now that I've been baptized by spit and sweat and broken glass, there was no turning back.
Nope.
So that's kind of I don't know if it's a short chapter. That's all I have on that one. Chapter 5, we got John Bonham, Seance. Now, my first band that I loved, still do, is Led Zeppelin.
Yep.
I was probably like 10, 12 when I started getting into them. And I talked about this with someone else. A friend of mine whose husband is British, and he actually saw Led Zeppelin in England right in the beginning.
Nice.
And we talked about when John Bonham passed away. I actually cried. And I don't think I cried in school because I was going to this tech school briefly. And they would announce cool stuff. Not cool stuff. I mean, not people, but like people dying. But they would announce music stuff and, just entertainment things rather than just what's on the menu for today.
Right.
But they announced John Bonham passing away.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is one of the shortest chapters, but Dave is 17, and Dave has an altar to John Bonham. He had the circle logo and the number 606 on display. Now 606, I figured, is something to do with Dave, not John, because Dave has I think his studio is called 606.
Yeah.
And I did figure out, it's not in the book, because I'm like, what is this 606? It took me a while to find it, but it is the number that was his dad's apartment number.
Oh, okay.
He leaves out stuff.
Yeah.
It's almost like he wrote this book, but didn't want to tell too much. I don't know. That's what it seemed to me. Like he was holding back.
He was guarded.
Yeah. So he has this wooden altar made of scrap wood. I think he painted the circles in the 606 on there. Now, this is where he also talks about going to the dentist and telling the dentist he drums with his teeth. And it took me, I had to figure this out, but it sounded like he would just mimic the drum beat with his teeth.
Yeah.
I thought he had the stick in his teeth and that.
Oh, no.
But I think he was drumming with just,
But he had to be doing it really hard for him to be creating the issues he was creating.
That's what I think. Okay, now we're on part 2.
Mm-hmm.
The build-up. Chapter 6, You Better Be Good. Dave, by this time, is obsessed with a punk band named Scream. He's in a band, and I thought this was funny, called Dane Bramage, which is great.
Yeah.
And I figured out Dave is still 17, but he's in a music shop in Falls Church, Virginia, which I know very well. I don't know the music store, but I've been to Falls Church at least 10 times.
Okay.
Because the Smithereens would play at the theater there. And Matt was living in Virginia, and we'd meet there. We'd get a hotel room, and then we'd walk to the venue.
Okay.
And we just picked that town because it was a in-between point.
Right.
I mean, I think I was driving a little farther than Matt, but he sees an ad for a band looking for a drummer, and the band is Scream, the band that Dave loves.
Yeah.
I think he hesitates at first, but he gets up the courage and calls the number. And he goes to audition at the band member's house. And it's just him and this guy, Franz Stahl, his name is. The audition goes pretty well. And he gets another audition with the full band. But he changes it up.
It's funny because there's a point in there where, I don't know if it was Franz or someone else, but they're like, well, do you know any Scream songs? And he's like, every song you perform.
Yeah.
So,
you know what? I went back in the book and I couldn't find that. And I'm like, did I just think that?
Yeah,
I was going to put that in here, but I couldn't find it.
Oh, yeah, no. It said it said it in the audiobook.
Yeah, do you want to play? I think he said Led Zeppelin, or what do you want to...
Yeah, what do you want to play? And it's like, well, what else? Like, I know every single Scream song.
Yeah. So why wouldn't you want him in the band?
I just thought that was so cool, because it's like if you... It'd be like me auditioning for AC/DC. I know every one of their songs.
Yeah. Well, like Tommy Thayer in Kiss... That's, has the Ace makeup, or did. He was in a Kiss tribute band, so he knew all the Kiss songs.
Yeah.
He knew all the guitar parts.
Yep. But no, you didn't imagine that.
He does the second audition and doesn't really give them a yes, right? Until he sees that. He goes to see them then.
Yeah.
And they still have their drummer at this point, but the guy, wants to quit or is going to go on and do other things. But he goes to see them in Washington, D.C., and then he wants in. But the problem is, Dave is 17.
Yeah.
So he wants to quit high school. Now, my parents would never have let me do this, no matter what.
Yeah. Well, it's like at the double whammy, because he lies about his age to get in with the band. He tells them that he's 21.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But then he also has to tell his mom that he's quitting school.
Yeah.
And she supports him.
Yeah.
She doesn't have a problem with him doing it. That caught me off guard. I kind of expected him to be like, my mom was not okay with it. I had to secretly do it or whatever. And no, she was just like...
Well, that's the chapter title.
Yeah.
She says, you'd better be good.
Yeah.
He has to go to the high school with his parents. And I think it was the principal's office to tell him he's dropping out. And his dad was not as forgiving as his mom. And actually says, while they're sitting there in the principal's office, you probably do all the things a kid your age shouldn't do, like smoke cigarettes and drink coffee. And as Dave and his mom make their way to the car, his dad yells, and stay off the drugs. And Dave's taken aback by the coffee. I think he mentions he didn't know that coffee was like cocaine or something like that.
Yeah. Well, you find out later.
But we'll find out later that it...
He's addicted to coffee.
Yeah.
Fresh pot!
So Dave goes on the road with the band, and he says he gets to meet some of his punk heroes. And he meets this guy, Nate Mendel, for the first time. And Nate became the bassist for the Foo Fighters. I always want to say the Foo Fighters, but I think it's Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
Since 1994. And the chapter ends with Dave in California, where he's at the beach, at a beach house owned by a friend's mother. Now, I have here, there was another story or two in this chapter, but we're going to not try and tell the whole book.
And some of the stories weren't that interesting. Or they just ended abruptly.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't anything too outrageous in this book. There are some memorable stories in this too, which I have a couple. So chapter 7, Sure, I Want to Be Your Dog. Now, I don't know if our listeners know where this is going with I Want to Be Your Dog, but it's a famous song by someone.
Mm-hmm.
Scream is setting up at a club for a 9 p.m. show. It's at the Rivoli on Queen Street in Toronto. Only problem is they are told they have to set up at noon, which seems odd. So Dave sees all these posters for Iggy Pop promoting his new album. And I don't know if it was said in the book, but I figured out it was Brick by Brick. That's the album.
Okay.
Because I kind of went by if they did say the year or I tried to figure out what it was.
Gotcha. They did not say the album. If they did, I don't remember it.
Yeah. He's told there's a record release party going on before they go on at 9. Now, I found it odd, but it was Iggy Pop. And I think, by that time he was, a punk icon, that they would schedule this record release party and also have a band going on at 9, like the same night. They're told that no one is allowed to see Iggy except the record company people. And they're told after their sound check they need to leave.
Right.
Dave and his bandmates, they go to their van. I take it it's in the alley. Well, it's in the alley, they say, probably behind the club.
Yeah.
Pretty soon a limo pulls up and they do see Iggy.
I think they were taking a nap or something, waiting until the show.
Yeah. A little bit later, there's a knock at the window. And the guy says, "Which one of you is the drummer?" And Dave said he's learned that nothing good ever comes from that question.
Right.
And he pops his head up from the back of the van, and all kinds of thoughts go through his head. Did he leave a lit cigarette on the drum riser? Was it some ex-boyfriend looking to kick his ass? But the guy says, "Want to play drums with Iggy Pop?" And Dave says, "Fuck yeah." Fuck yeah. Dave not only jams with Iggy, he's asked to play the record release party. So where's Iggy's band? What happened?
Yeah.
Iggy and Dave are rehearsing. At one point, Dave asks, "Should we have a bass player?" Iggy responds, "You got one?" And Dave runs out to the van and gets their bass player, Skeeter. Now, at this point, the band basically living out of a van.
Yep.
They're given $7.50 a day to spend. That's what they're living on.
He gets to a point where he's telling you how he's eating 3-for-1 corn dogs to survive.
Mm-hmm.
He could eat one corn dog for breakfast, which was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon when he would wake up, and then 2 the rest of the night. And that was all he could afford.
Well, what's amazing, that was when he first joined Nirvana.
Yeah.
Right before their big album.
Yeah, it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah. So a guy comes around, he said a label representative, keeps coming around asking if they need anything. And he gets a carton of cigarettes, case of beer.
Yep.
Like they need that before the show. Like they're going to drink a case of beer. Come on.
Got everything they asked for, too.
Yeah.
Because he started with a pack of cigarettes.
Oh, yeah. Then he asked for
a case of beer. Done. He's like, well, how about carton of cigarettes?
Yeah.
What else you need?
But no food. Cigarettes and beer. That's probably what they're living on.
Yep.
So we're on chapter 8. Everybody is a blank page. And the chapter covers them going city to city, working in between shows to pay for food, weed, and beer. All the things up-and-coming punk rockers need, to sustain themselves. This chapter wasn't that interesting. He just goes through, like, some things that happened on the road. But he does say at one point, they did sign a recording contract, which they signed in the back of the van, or in the van, without even a lawyer. And Skeeter goes missing. So this is pretty much the end of the band, or the end of Dave being a part of the band. Says they aren't really doing any gigs. Dave is staying with a bandmate's sister, who is a mud wrestler. Now this is the turning point, though, too. Like, all things happen for a reason sometimes. Because here the band's breaking apart. You wonder, what was Dave going to move back with his parents or his mom? But he gets a call from a friend who lives in Aberdeen, Washington. People probably know what I'm going to say if you know Nirvana. So Kurt Cobain was born in Aberdeen. Chris Novoselic was born in California. And of course, Dave was... Where was Dave born?
Virginia,
right? I think so. So we don't even know where Dave was born. And we, read his book.
I think he grew up in Virginia at the very least.
So his friend asked, "Have you heard of Nirvana?" And Dave says, of course he has, because Dave was listening to stuff that, was not on the radio, was not. He like dove deep into punk, and probably what came from punk was grunge. So he knew who Nirvana was. I mean, I didn't know Nirvana till Nevermind came out. It wasn't like I ever heard of the songs on Bleach.
Right.
I was buying stuff from, I watch MTV. Mm-hmm. Also, Matt and I, we would watch a show called 120 Minutes, which is actually going to come up in a minute. But Matt and I would watch that. And that's where I 120 Minutes was pretty advanced, because it wasn't your typical pop and rock. It was the underground stuff. Some of the, not really underground, but the college stuff.
I've gotten lucky sometimes going to shows. Mm-hmm. The opening acts that a lot of people aren't into.
Yeah.
Nirvana was probably an opening act at some point that nobody had ever heard of.
Yeah.
So I've gotten lucky in that.
There's a radio show on, you don't have Sirius, right?
No.
It's Little Steven's Underground Garage, and he plays little bands on independent labels. And
okay.
I think that's a good source now for bands that aren't Cardi B. I have to say Cardi B on every podcast. No, I don't. Okay. Back to the book. Nirvana is looking for a drummer. Dave calls Chris Novoselic. Chris says he needs to talk to Kurt. Pretty soon Dave's on the phone with Kurt. And Kurt just says, if you can make it up here, let us know. They don't really know Dave. It's a mutual friend that knows Dave and I guess puts in a good word for him.
Well, Dave drops that a word of wisdom for all the readers. If you want to get someone's attention, talk to their girlfriend.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that was when he was auditioning. He was going to audition for Scream.
Was it with Scream? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't remember if it was Scream or Nirvana, but
yeah, because I think he talked to the girlfriend.
Yeah, because he didn't. The first time he didn't hear back. The guy was like, "Yeah, sure.
Oh yeah,
let us know or whatever."
Yeah.
And he had to actually reach out again, and he talked to the girlfriend.
Dave packs his duffel bag, his drum kit, and he heads to Seattle. And again, just like with the Beatles, Dave is never seen again. That's the end of our podcast? No. We all know what happens next. Well, not all of us, maybe. I don't know. And it's chapter 9. It's a forever thing. It starts out with Dave getting a tattoo representing one of his idols. And who do you think his idol is, people? We talked about his altar.
Yep,
John Bonham.
But does he get a tattoo, or does he try to give himself a tattoo?
Well, then he goes into the... Yeah, well... Yeah, this isn't Dave's first tattoo. So he gets the 3 circles that represents... Which really doesn't mean anything. Like with Led Zeppelin, they each had their own symbol. Mm-hmm. But John Bonham had said that it was just something he came up with. I at one point, and maybe still, I was thinking of getting the tattoo of the 4 symbols. I got my Beatles, but I don't know if I want a tattoo, here. Dave talks about when he was 14, he tattooed himself. I didn't know this was even possible. I would not have attempted it on myself. Maybe Jeremy probably wouldn't either. Because I would think the ink would like poison me or something, probably.
Right.
I also didn't like needles. Dave takes I don't know what kind of ink he used. I think it said a jar of ink.
Yeah, it didn't go into detail.
And started jabbing himself. I think he heated the needle, but started poking himself. And the tattoo he was tattooing was the Black Flag logo, which is the 4 solid bars of black. And Dave said he got to the 3rd one and he gave up. So I wonder what it looks like now, or if he had it go, if he had gone over it. But I looked at pictures of Dave, and there are a couple marks on his arms that look like they look like nothing. So it looks like maybe those were his experiments. I don't know.
Wow.
Dave becomes a member of Nirvana, as we know, and his first paycheck is $400.
Yeah.
Now they're being courted by every major label when he joined the band. Now him and Kurt lived together. It sounded like a house, but it was a dump. Dave slept on the couch. There was some, I guess Kurt's turtle was in the same room and keep Dave up all night. And this is, Jeremy brought this up, this is when... Amazingly, this is when he was buying the corn dogs.
Yeah.
They would last throughout the day. Now, what does Dave blow the $400 on?
Convertible, right?
No. He buys a BB gun.
Uh-huh.
He gets a tattoo, and I think that's probably the John Bonham tattoo, and a Nintendo.
Oh, okay.
And actually, after reading this, I'm like, I don't know, I kind of want a Nintendo now, because I think he talked about playing Super Mario Brothers or something.
Yep.
But Dave really misses Virginia. But what keeps him going is the music and Nirvana. I guess they met with some music executives. This is pretty odd for Kurt to say this, but I think he was joking at the time. And this is before they came out with Nevermind. We want to be the biggest band in the world. Famous last words. So while they were living in squalor, they were working on the songs that would be on the Nevermind album. And he said they were writing, Kurt was writing a new song a week. Now, they had already recorded songs, this is without Dave, with Butch Vig. Mm-hmm. We mentioned him on the last podcast. Now, they were recorded with former drummer Chad Channing, songs like In Bloom, Lithium, and Polly. And they ended up signing with the David Geffen Company. Now, one person they wanted to produce the album was Don Dixon. And of course, Don, we talked about last podcast, he produced R.E.M. and the Smithereens. And I was very surprised the Smithereens are actually mentioned in this book.
Mm-hmm. You know, something that I noticed, and I don't want it to sound like a negative, because on one hand, I enjoy the stories, but it almost felt like he did a lot of name dropping just to do name dropping at times.
Now, it's kind of weird, but they came out, I don't know if you know, but they actually published Kurt Cobain's journal, and I have it. You know, it came out years ago.
Okay.
There's one section where Kurt lists all these bands that he likes, and the Smithereens are in there.
Okay. That
was one band that Kurt really liked. And I don't think they never met, you know, Kurt or anything like that. So they end up with Butch Vig, producer. They didn't even have gas money.
Right.
At this point. Of course, Dave, you know, blew his $400. But they need to travel to L.A. to record. So they book a show. They book a show in Seattle at the OK Hotel, and they debut the song Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Yep.
This was April 17th, 1991. Very monumental. People probably didn't know at the time.
No, he went into details about how he thought it was a bad idea to play a song that nobody had ever heard of, but the reaction was thunderous.
Yeah, they went wild.
Yeah.
Chapter 10, we were surrounded and there was no way out. Now they performed 30 shows in 40 days.
That's a lot.
It's the North American leg of the Nevermind tour. I wish I had seen this. It's the fall of 91. Like I said, I was really into them. I could have gone to see them, and they even actually played at Stabler Arena.
Man.
In East, and it's a small, that's where they have the basketball games, the Lehigh basketball games. So Nevermind is released September 24th, 1991. And maybe people know this, but Chad Channing is actually on one of the songs because they did not re-record it with Dave, and it's Polly. Do you know the song Polly? Do you know?
Polly want a cracker. Yeah.
But you know what the song's about?
I always thought it was about a bird, but I assume
I
it's
have
not.
that here because I thought it was about a parrot.
Okay.
But it's not. And I just found this out. Even though I'm a big Nirvana, I just didn't know. But it's pretty damn disturbing. So don't even look it up, but I can tell you briefly, it's about a guy who kidnapped like a 14-year-old girl after a concert.
Oh, great.
And had basically sexually messed with her, and she survived. Luckily, she escaped. I think the guy is still, I don't know his name, and I don't want to say his name, but I think he's still in jail, still alive. Not the first time he did that. He was paroled after the first incident.
Jesus. I used to love that song. Now I don't know anymore.
But if you listen closely, he talks about a blowtorch. Not that incident, but the incident before they was jailed for the first time, there was a blowtorch. So Kurt wasn't known for sweet songs. Like I said, I thought it was about a parrot. That's what I actually have here. Boy, was I way off.
Yeah.
So Nirvana went from playing 100 to 200 seat venues to 600 plus. You know, not arenas. Yeah. I don't even know if they played arenas other than like maybe if they played like the MTV Awards or something like that.
Well, they did MTV Unplugged.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But that's a small venue, too.
Yeah.
So once Smells Like Teen Spirit gained momentum, the crowds grew larger, and Dave felt conflicted with becoming so huge since he was at heart a rough and rowdy punk rocker. And I think I wrote this, every punk rocker's nightmare is being too popular. I don't know if he wrote that or I wrote that.
Right.
So Dave didn't think Kurt was serious when he said they wanted to be the biggest band in the world.
Right.
I don't think he was either. I think he preferred just writing music and playing the songs to smaller crowds. But once the video came out, all bets were off. So Kurt and Dave were in the same hotel room when the video came out. And it was first played on 120 Minutes.
Yep.
Like I said, Matt and I would go over to Tim's for, I don't know how long we did this. But we'd watch the Tracy Ullman Show, The Simpsons. I saw The Simpsons when it wasn't a show. When it was on the Tracy Ullman Show, that's where it started.
Okay.
As a little skit. We'd come back to my house. I was living with my parents. And we'd watch 120 Minutes. It was on till like 1 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And we both have to get up early for work the next day. But the host was Matt Pinfield. And I've been trying to get him for an interview. He has messaged me back. We're just trying to work something out.
Cool.
But that would be really cool.
That would be cool.
And he has stories. So things start getting out of hand with the security. And then we go into, not going to get into too much detail, but, you know, people were spilling on the stage. And then one incident, and I think it was in Dallas, where Kurt dives off the stage with his guitar in the audience.
Yep.
Now, he's already pissed at the security, you know, for not doing their job because the crowd is just surging. And he ends up hitting the security guard over the head with his guitar. The guy's bleeding. After the show, they're still in the venue. They're probably in their dressing room or backstage. And they get word that this guy wants blood. He wants to kill them.
He literally wants to kill them.
Yeah. They manage to escape, but they forget Dave. And there's a crowd chasing the car that Kurt is in and Chris. And they actually manage to smash one of the windows, but they get away.
Yep.
I don't know where Dave went or put a hat on, made himself not noticeable.
Right.
Yeah, unnoticeable. Okay, so chapter 11, The Divide. Nirvana is set to play on SNL. This is January 11th. And I most likely watched this because I haven't really missed, there was a couple years in there where I missed Saturday Night Live.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably like in the late 80s or something. I don't know. There was a period there where I didn't watch it, but I haven't missed any since then. Now, Dave, it's weird because Dave makes it seem like it's been a long time, but it's actually, I figured it out. The last time we saw each other was New Year's Eve. So it's January 11th.
Wow. Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
serious. It
sound
actually
like it was
says that they haven't seen each other.
Or a year.
Yeah.
So, oh, wow.
And Dave, this is how intense Dave Grohl is playing drums, is that he actually breaks a stick.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to ask Matt, because Matt's a drummer, like how much power do you need to put on a stick to break it? Unless it was an old stick.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I wanted to mention at the end, a lot of stuff he doesn't go into a lot of detail.
Nope.
So he doesn't, say about meeting any cast members, like nothing, no inside information. He does say that Weird Al calls them. I don't know why. I think just while they were in New York, and asked permission to use Smells Like Teen Spirit to parody. And do you remember what the song was?
I don't know.
Smells Like Nirvana.
Oh, okay.
I love Weird Al so much that I was in, where was I? I don't know. Maybe it was the grocery store. Where was I? I was somewhere and Avril Lavigne song, Complicated,
Okay.
do you know the song?
Yeah.
Is playing. I immediately think of Weird Al's parody. If you've never heard the song, Jeremy, the one thing in there about ordering pizzas, eating too much cheese,
Yeah.
it's about being...
Well, I mean, I can relate because every time I hear Gangster's Paradise, I think of Amish Paradise.
Yeah. So anyway, Weird Al calls to ask permission, which obviously they gave him. And then Dave kind of says, and he doesn't talk about recording with Nirvana, anything like that. Nothing about the videos.
Nope.
Which were pretty interesting at the time.
The only thing he really said about the band was that they all were never like a family. They were all kind of their own. They did their own thing.
That's what it sounds like. So they weren't.
It sounds like Kurt kept to himself. Dave kept to himself.
Yeah.
Like they just all kind of. I don't know.
Well, if you think about it, they weren't together that long before Kurt, committed suicide, and I think if Kurt had lived and they continued on longer, maybe they would have grown more better friends. Because it was all relatively new. I mean, I don't even know how long Chris and Kurt knew each other.
Right. It doesn't say.
Because Chris was born in California.
Yep.
And so when did he move to Seattle? Was he only there like a year? Was he there?
That's a good question.
And Dave says he learned in January 91 that Kurt was using heroin. And it does sound like Dave didn't use drugs.
Yeah.
Or he's not telling us.
Yeah, I was going to say, if he did, he didn't put it out there.
Yeah.
I'll wait till you get to it, but there's a funny story.
Okay. He says things start to look better once they go to Australia. They even go jet skiing, bungee jumping, and then they tour Japan. He said the shows appear a lot different than most of the places they've played. The stage is clean. There's military police all around making sure everyone stays in their seats. No stage diving, rushing the stages in Japan. But of course, at the end of and I never understood this because I have 2 electric guitars and an acoustic. I like my guitars. I would, but to smash...
You didn't want to smash them?
I think it's the amount of money maybe you're making. But you think about people like Paul McCartney, anybody, maybe even Eric Clapton, that have certain guitars that they love. Rick Nielsen, he's probably got some good... I know he has certain guitars he plays on certain songs because it has a certain tone.
Right.
But to just destroy your instruments, so they weren't really attached, of course. But I think it's funny because after they decide to smash their instruments at the concert in Japan. So this was pretty wild for them to see this. But I think it's funny. Dave says this guy came up to him and said, "Did you not like the drums?" Now Dave goes back to Virginia.
Dave had to explain to the guy that it was like a good thing that he did, not that it was any disrespect.
Yeah. Dave visits his father, and his father has more advice for him. Or not advice, but he says, "You know this isn't going to last, right?" Which, in a way, he could have been right.
Yeah.
Because nothing lasts forever. Even when you're at your height, you've got to come down at some point.
For sure.
But Dave Grohl has an incredible career after Nirvana. Now, at this point, they all have some money. Dave buys a house in North Carolina. Kurt gets an apartment in Hollywood. And Chris bought a house in Seattle. But the chapter ends with Kurt in rehab in LA.
So that's where I was going a couple minutes ago. So Dave says something to the extent of, "I never did drugs. I didn't know what rehab was. I just assumed it was this quick thing where you go in and they fix you and you're done."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Call me naive," or however he worded it, but call me naive. I never knew what rehab was all about either until I've heard about so many people having the relapses after coming out of rehab.
Yeah.
So I could kind of share the humor in it with him of thinking it was, you go in, you're fixed, and you come back out.
Yeah.
Until you actually understand addiction, you don't know, what someone's dealing with.
Yeah, and anything could trigger that. So we're on part 3, the moment. Now this is a sad chapter. Chapter 12, he's gone. Now it starts out with Kurt overdosing in Paris. I remember all this. Now Dave first got a call that Kurt had died.
Yep.
Now someone calls back and says, no, he's still alive. And Dave mentions that this was his first brush with death, which is hard for me to believe. But, if he only lived with his mother, I don't know if he had any aunts, uncles. But, when I was really young, my parents took me to a funeral, and I just don't forget.
Right.
But Dave at this point is 25. So.
And he said, and this kind of stuck with me as I was reading it, because it was his first bout with death. He grew up thinking after, the next time it happened, that he would get a call. He would wait for the next call and be like, no, it didn't actually happen.
Oh, yeah.
And he said he was his mind was trained wrong, and he was so messed up from that.
Yeah, to think that someone was lying or the person could come back
Made a
from
mistake or whatever. Yeah. It was really, that was an interesting, bizarre kind of twist that I didn't see coming.
So he said he had seen Kurt a couple days before, which was in Munich, and that would be their last show.
Germany, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boiler alert! Boiler alert!
36 days later, Kurt would actually be dead.
Yeah.
And Dave, again, I'm surprised. Not that I wanted him to go into it, but doesn't talk about going to a funeral, doesn't talk.
No, it just...
Never mentions Courtney Love at all, which maybe he shouldn't. I don't know. You wonder the relationship, though. Like...
Well, because he mentions how he cared about him, and he was such a great friend, and they were starting to bond. And it kind of went into depth on that aspect and how it messed him up emotionally, and he was so devastated, and he didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
But, to your point, it didn't say, that he went to the funeral or spent time with the family. Like, anything. There was nothing. It was just...
I know.
Kind of moved on.
Even with the record label, like what happened,
Right.
Because there was this box set which I have, and I think it's called, I want to say it's called Turn the Lights Out or something like that. But they had to get Courtney Love involved because she, was part of the estate. But this was years later because it was demos. He doesn't go into like some of this stuff.
Right.
That I would have liked to have, known about. But Dave has a childhood friend, Jimmy, but this is where he jumps around. Who dies 14 years later in 2008.
Yeah.
But this is one of the shortest chapters, and like I said, nothing about Nirvana in detail. No mention of In Utero. And I don't really fault Dave entirely because, like I said, this is not a Nirvana biography, but it was a huge part of his life, you would think.
Right.
It was a short part. That's the thing. It was a short part. Now, chapter 13. Are we only on 13?
Yeah.
The Heartbreaker. Tom Petty asked Dave to play drums for his solo gig on SNL.
Which is so random, by the way.
Yeah.
And even Dave talked about that. Like, where's his drummer? Why is he asking me?
Yeah.
I wish there was more on that, but anyway.
Now, Dave claimed he's been on SNL 14 times. So he was obviously with other bands that asked him. Seems like he got asked a lot to drum. I think it has to be a record next to maybe Miley Cyrus or something. Now Dave starts working on the Foo Fighters' first album. But Dave goes to Ireland before this to take a little break. So he's having a nice relaxing time. But he drives down some road and sees a kid walking, along the road. And I think he was going to pick the kid up or roll down the window.
He said he was going to stop for him.
And the kid kind of, I think, I get the idea the kid turns around and he's wearing a Nirvana shirt.
Wearing a
Kurt Cobain shirt. Yeah. With Kurt Cobain on the shirt.
Yeah.
And Dave takes off. And I think he realizes he's never going to escape Nirvana. Now, he talks about writing songs while he was in Nirvana, but felt Kurt would never let him record a song. He says, what was the last thing the drummer said before he was kicked out of the band? Hey guys, I wrote a song I think we should play.
Yeah.
There we go. So this is October 94. He starts recording. What's amazing is he plays all the instruments on the first album, 15 songs, sort of like what Paul McCartney did. I don't know if you know Paul McCartney's solo career, but there's Paul McCartney 2, and 3, which came out a couple of years ago.
Okay.
But those 3 albums are just Paul.
Okay.
There's no other musicians.
Huh.
And it's amazing to me when you listen to it to think that this person is playing the drums, the bass. I mean, Paul played bass, guitar, everything. And putting it all together, that's just mind-boggling to me. Because I think sometimes you can go in the recording studio with the band and all kind of play at the same time sometimes. But to do that separately and make it come together, just amazing. And Dave picks the name Foo Fighter from a UFO book he's reading. And then as it began with Tom Petty, it ends where he decides to take Tom Petty up on his offer. And You mentioned this. You posted, Jeremy posted today about, that we're going to be recording about Dave Grohl and about how he almost was in the Heartbreakers. And Tom wants him to join the Heartbreakers. And Dave.
Yeah, it's just a mind-blowing. I posed the question, can you imagine if Dave Grohl joined Tom Petty? And people were like, well, then he would have never been, what he became. I get that. I just was looking at it from the standpoint of, can you imagine him drumming for, with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers? That's amazing.
Would he have changed the dynamic? I don't know. I listen more now to Foo Fighters than I have before. And there are slower things, and there, I always thought of them as being like in your face, but he can drum, kind of light. And he did the Bee Gees album.
But how courageous is he to turn down that offer and just, do his own thing?
I think if he didn't have this vision for Foo Fighters, and he was working on, I don't know if he had finished the album at this point, he just wanted to do his own thing. He wanted to create his own thing. I think that took over him wanting to join someone else, have someone else being directing. And he had been through that before as a drummer, and maybe he didn't want to be a drummer anymore.
Right.
Because the whole thing with Nirvana, with him saying I was writing songs, but he knew he couldn't present them. So would this be, I'm just going to be a drummer. I'm never going to be able to express myself in songs. Do I want to do that for the rest of my life, or for a long time, so.
There was an interesting story. I don't know if you were planning to talk about it with Tom Petty. They went to go on, I think it was SNL, and there's this,
Oh, it's the same chapter.
Oh, is it?
Where seemed like they wanted to focus on Dave. Yeah, that was weird.
That was one part, and then there's like this stagehand or
let's focus on the guy that was in Nirvana.
Yeah.
And not Tom Petty. So they wanted him to move a cymbal or something.
Yeah. So Dave holds his ground. He's like, no, we can't do that, man.
Yeah.
But then they try and get Tom Petty to move
the mic, and he tells him.
He's like, you're going to fuck up the sound.
Yeah, you're going to fuck up the sound.
And finally they move, and the sound gets all fucked up.
You're going to fuck up the sound, man.
And Tom Petty makes him repeat back to him what he said. I thought that was funny.
So chapter 14, Sweet Virginia. Dave starts recording the second Foo Fighter album. This time he has a band, and including Taylor Hawkins on drums. And what's interesting is he has not really moved to, or doesn't have a house. They record in Seattle, by the way, the second album. Now he ends up buying a house outside of Alexandria, Virginia, and it has a basement where he can use as a studio. Now he talks a little bit about Taylor Hawkins in this chapter. Taylor was Alanis Morissette's touring drummer. I looked this up because he was not on any of the studio albums.
Okay.
But he toured with her. Jagged Little Pill came out and was in some of the videos.
Okay.
Which I hadn't had a chance to. I actually want to watch and see Taylor. Now the Foo Fighters get to play at Ozfest, and they are going on after Pantera, which Dave loves. And I don't know too much about. I've always heard of Pantera, but I don't even know any of their songs. On page 216, this is how he describes the band: the most awesome, most brutal, most vulgar display of power known to man. Now afterwards they hang with Pantera backstage. Vinnie Paul, I can't even tell you if he's the singer, the guitar. He gives Dave a special card. Jeremy, remember?
Yes.
This will give him and whoever he brings, I take with him, access to their strip club. They own a strip club in Dallas called the Clubhouse. I don't think I looked up to see if it's still there. So months later, Dave and Taylor are making their way back to Virginia. They decide to visit the Clubhouse. So they're on the road. They probably, I don't know if they were doing shows but it's Dave and Taylor. And the only problem is that along the way, Dave loses his wallet. And the fear all men, I say used to have, because a lot of people have their not everybody, but a lot of people have their stuff on their cell phones.
Yep.
My card's on there, but I haven't used it on my phone. So anyway, they go to the club and they get turned away. Now this is a unique story, as is another one I'm going to talk about in a little bit, is that Dave finds his wallet 10 years later.
Yeah. A lady tells him.
Yeah. So you ask, how could someone possibly find their wallet after being lost, especially on a road trip? So 10 years later, Dave walks into a surf shop in Oxnard, California. He gets to the counter and the girl looks at him and asks, "Are you Dave Grohl?" And he says, "Yes." She replies, "Did you lose your wallet in Barstow?" Which I think it might also be California. I don't know.
Right.
In 1998. He can't believe it. But this girl's parents owned a gas station where him and Taylor stopped. And that's where Dave lost his wallet. And they still had the wallet.
They kept it.
Yeah.
And everything was still there, he said.
Yeah. So I have here, I guess her parents weren't big Nirvana fans, because I would have tried to find Dave and hand him his wallet back to him.
Yeah.
Right? At this time, the third Foo Fighters album, There Is Nothing Left to Lose, is recorded, and Dave cites this as the best album.
That's got to be like 96, 97, somewhere around there. I'm just going off the top of my head. Maybe 95, but
I don't know, because he jumped to 2008 with the wallet.
The book jumps around a lot. We'll talk.
Well, he lost his wallet in 98, so this has got to be 98 then. 98, 99.
What was that album again?
Hold on. There is nothing left to lose.
99.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I was just curious because I remember that had "Learn to Fly" was on that album. I had that album. I played that one a lot too, but I thought it was earlier.
So that was 99, third album, and the album won Best Album at the Grammys.
Yeah, that was a good album.
So we're on chapter 15. This is what I wanted. Now this chapter pretty much tells you that you can be a rock and roll star and still raise a family. We get into Neil Young in the beginning and his now ex-wife Peggy. They had a benefit concert they would do every year. Yeah. Benefit children with disabilities. So they'd gather beforehand at Neil's house with whoever was performing at the benefit. So, you're eating potato salad with like Springsteen, Dylan, Sir Paul, and it raised millions each year. I did look this up. The concert stopped in 2016.
Okay.
But it is, the Bridge Street School still exists. So they still raise money for disabled children. So then we cover 3 births here. Dave's 3 daughters. That's, this book is like jumping all over the place. So Violet, 2006.
Yeah.
I had to look a couple of these up. Harper, 2009. And Ophelia, 2020. So we jump all the way to 2020.
Ophelia threw me off big time. Yeah. The other 2, they made it sound like they were only a year apart. So you telling me 3 years, that makes a little more sense now. But
well, and then 11 years. Yeah. Same woman.
Yep.
Which is great. So he talks about balancing touring and family, which is very, I would imagine, very hard being on the road, unless you're bringing your family with you. I know for a fact that one person is Pink. Brings her husband, her kids with her. Mm-hmm. When she's on tour, it's just, months of vacation for probably these kids.
Right.
Hotels, good food.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll realize later on how great that is. But,
right.
Because not everybody can do that.
No.
Jeremy's jet setting off to autograph shows every other weekend, North Carolina.
Yeah.
I think next week he's in Spain. Yep. No, I'm just kidding.
Yep.
And he does have fears of being an absentee parent since his dad, left when he was 6. So
yeah, I think that's the first time we find that out.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're going to bring up a story soon that will tell you how much he's making up for that thought. It's just to the extreme.
Very, yeah.
Right. So he talks about Paul McCartney and his wife Linda. They visit their home after Ophelia is born.
Yep.
So I love this. Dave says, of course, spent the hour before his arrival hiding the mountains of Beatles stuff I had in the house. He said, you never know how much Beatles memorabilia you have until a Beatle comes to visit.
Yeah.
I'd like to know that feeling, but I don't have a lot of stuff.
I would not hide the stuff. I would keep it up proudly.
Yeah. They're the Beatles. I mean, it's not, you know.
Yeah.
So everything goes well. And as Paul is leaving, he notices Dave's piano. And this is great. Can you imagine? This is the thing when you're all in the same kind of business. It's just another, but you get the feeling Dave is kind of starstruck with some of these. And he mentions maybe more than once that, how did I get here?
Yes.
Like what? And I would be saying that to myself too.
Yep.
I mean, even with the little podcast that I do, some of the people I interview, I'm like, you know, I'm grateful that I can talk to these people that I normally wouldn't be able to talk to.
Right.
Which I have one I have not even told you yet, Jeremy, but our next interview.
Uh-oh.
So Paul sits down and plays Lady Madonna. But this is funny. His daughter, Dave's daughter, Harper, disappears for a moment and comes back with a coffee cup that she filled with spare change and places it on the piano as a tip jar.
Yep.
That's pretty funny. Okay, chapter 16 is I don't have much in this chapter. Because Dave basically performs Band on the Run in front of President Obama and Paul McCartney.
And then basically says how miserable he is doing it.
Yeah. And this was part of Paul being presented with the Library of Congress Gershwin Prize. That's all I have on that chapter.
Yeah.
Okay. Chapter 17, Down Under DUI. Foo Fighters are playing the Big Day Out Festival. And maybe our friend Ken Cook knows what this is. Maybe he's been to a couple of these. This is in 2000 in Sydney, Australia. Now, the first time they played this festival was when Dave was in Nirvana in 1992. It sounds like that was the first Big Day Out festival.
Yeah.
And they headlined the festival. So by 2000, it became huge. He says it's a 3-week, 6-city festival.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm sure Ken Cook, I'm not sure where Ken lives, but I'm sure he knows about this.
I'm sure, but I at least heard about it.
Maybe he saw Nirvana back in the day.
Maybe.
He also goes into the time when we get into psychic. This is a weird chapter. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I thought it was funny when he was at the height of Nirvana's fame. He goes to a psychic, and the psychic, who wasn't very good at this,
No.
don't give up. Someday you'll make it. I would think that'd be making it.
That's like a fortune cookie fortune.
Yeah. Buy more Chinese food, you know. But then he goes into another time visiting a psychic, which he claims his girlfriend dragged him there. And he talks about, I remember her saying about, do you see UFOs? And she said, those aren't dreams, that's real. Yeah. Like Dave doesn't talk about being taken on a spaceship or anything like that.
It was just very out there.
Yeah. And he mentions a ghost in his house.
Yeah.
Which is kind of eerie because he feels like someone's following him around in the house. And it's downstairs. So he's having some kind of party or something. And his friend, out of the blue, he doesn't say anything to anybody, says, man, I felt like someone was following me. So Dave's not just imagining this.
Right.
It's like freaking real. And we watch enough horror movies. It's like freaking real entity.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the big part of the chapter is when Taylor and Dave rent scooters to get to the festival. And I think they even ride them out on the stage, if I'm correct. Something like that. They just love these scooters they were renting. So once their set is done, it sounds like they left before the other bands. Like as soon as they were done, they head back to the hotel. I'm not sure how far they had to ride.
Yeah, I don't know.
But they hit some traffic. They think there's a car accident, but no, it's a sobriety check.
Yep.
And of course, Dave obviously has been drinking, and maybe Taylor has not.
Right.
Because as Dave is blowing through a breathalyzer, Taylor buzzes by him.
Right. He comes back.
Yeah.
Which Dave also mentioned, like, he could have just ditched the scooter once he noticed what was going on, but he just drove up to the checkpoint, like,
because he was on a moving vehicle.
Right.
Dave says, I was soon handcuffed, placed in the back of a police car, and driven to a mobile police station across the street, where I was interrogated by detectives as if I were Ted Bundy. I'm not sure on this point where he says he had to go back a week later. I don't know if they stayed another week. I would have just stayed another week. You know, I wouldn't have flown back, and
Right.
unless he had a commitment, you know, like more shows in the U.S. But so as Dave's leaving the hotel in Melbourne in his suit on his way to court, he runs into, he doesn't say his name, the guitarist from Primal Scream.
Yeah.
And he says to Dave, what do you call a Foo Fighter in a suit? And he says, guilty. The guy says guilty.
Yeah.
And Dave says, this did not help.
No.
So Dave is convicted, but not given any jail time. He's fined. But now every time he goes to Australia, he's questioned as to what he was convicted of.
Yeah.
You know, riding a scooter, drunk.
Yep.
Chapter 18, life was picking up speed. So this is one of the funniest chapters I found because it refers to a video. So you get, and I don't know if you looked up this video.
I did not.
You have to watch this video
Okay.
to get the full effect. So Dave thinks he's having a heart attack and he goes to the doctor. But the doctor finds out Dave is literally drinking coffee all day.
Yeah.
Pots and pots. And he has a lot going on at this point. He's formed a new band called Them Crooked Vultures with John Paul Jones, who was the bass player for Led Zeppelin, and Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age.
Yes.
So if you haven't heard this band, Jeremy, you should check them out. Them Crooked Vultures.
Okay.
He says he was looking for something different besides playing Learning to Fly every night. And he first met John Paul Jones when he performed for the Foo Fighters album In Your Honor in 2004. John Paul Jones is on Miracle, but get this, he's on 2 songs and he doesn't play bass.
Huh.
He's playing the piano on Miracle, and another round he's playing mandolin.
Okay.
Now, Josh is also on this album. He has never met John Paul Jones before because obviously they recorded in different songs and different places. I'm going to direct you to the video soon, but the other funny thing is that John flies to LA and attends Dave's 40th birthday party, which is at, of all places, medieval times.
Yep.
And John Paul Jones has never been to medieval times, so that must have been an experience. But he's also there to test the waters by jamming with Dave to see if he wants to be in this band. Dave is also working on the Greatest Hits album for Foo Fighters, and they're recording a new song, which they sometimes do with the Greatest Hits. They record a song or two.
Right.
Also, his second daughter, Harper, is born. He's also set to perform at the White House on July 4th. I don't know how close all this is to each other.
Yeah.
He's remodeling his house also.
Mm-hmm.
This is from page 285. For weeks, my new routine went something like this. Wake at the crack of dawn to a newborn and a 3-year-old demanding my individual attention while buzzsaws and jackhammers roar in the distance. Make a pot of coffee. Drink said pot of coffee and speed over to Foo Fighters studio. Make another pot of coffee. Start working. Drink that pot of coffee, but also drink strong brewed iced tea between pots, thinking this is hydration. And he goes on with more pots of coffee being consumed. So his friend Liam films Dave during the recording sessions and makes a video. And I have to tell you, this is a hilarious video. It's called Fresh Pots. So look up Dave Grohl Fresh Pots on YouTube.
Okay.
And try not to be drinking or eating anything while watching it. Because it's Dave just, like, at one point he's just sitting on the couch and he's going, Fresh Pots! Fresh Pots! And then he's dancing around. Like, you can tell he's had so much caffeine.
Wow.
And the video is probably like 5 minutes. I don't think it's more than 5 minutes, but
okay.
But it's different. It's different times. And Dave drinking coffee, Dave yelling Fresh Pots.
Wow.
Fresh pots!
Like, make a fresh.
Wow.
But he had to have been like constantly,
Yeah.
like all day.
It sounded like when he went to the doctor, saying the doctor's like, you need to stop drinking coffee.
Yeah. Dave sees his doctor to perform some heart tests on him. They don't find anything, which is good.
Right.
But he says, take it easy. Play drums 3 times a week. Have a glass of wine. This is what the doctor recommends.
Right.
Although I heard 1 glass of wine is good for your night.
Yeah.
He says, before bed and lay off the coffee. Dave says 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Decaf blows.
Yeah.
Which I can agree with. So I have the feeling he maybe was playing the drums and not drinking the wine, but drinking the coffee.
Yep.
Okay, chapter 19, Swinging with AC/DC.
This was my favorite chapter.
Starts out 1980. Dave and his friend Lenny Hinkle, they go see the AC/DC film Let There Be Rock, which I've never seen, which I'd like to see. Then we speed ahead to 2015.
The timeline on this was so hard to keep up with, just in general, not this chapter, just the whole book.
Now, something I don't have here is Dave did go to an AC/DC concert, and he happened to be at the same hotel, and they're at the bar, him and his friends, and Brian Johnson sits down.
I have that concert on VHS.
Well, no,
because it was in Mexico.
Let There Be Rock?
No, the
one he's talking about.
The one he's talking about,
okay.
yes. He said it happened in Mexico.
Okay.
And the concert on VHS happened in Mexico. So, I mean, there could have been other ones, but I feel like that was a very unique concert. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd have to double check it, but I'm pretty sure it's the one I have on VHS.
Yeah. So Brian's, he like cheers, he says, cheers, boys. Or, Dave gets the feeling he thought those were his roadies or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
This is funny. This is a funny chapter and kind of strange. Dave is planning a dinner, like an after dinner party after the 57th Grammy Awards. Now, I was confused because I thought it was in New Orleans. Like they don't hold it because of the band that we're going to talk about.
Right. So
it starts small. You know, he invites Paul McCartney.
Small.
Brian Johnson, but it's all of AC/DC. But Dave invites his friend Ben. Now Ben is in the Preservation Hall Jazz Band, and Ben asked if he can bring the other guys. And there's about 7 people in the band. I don't know if Ben gets the idea. I think Ben gets the idea that they'll come marching down the street. And they have certain uniforms they wear, playing music and come into the restaurant playing, their jazz music.
Right.
Now, I looked up this restaurant, actually. You can't tell with LA if it's, you have to be a certain caliber of person to be in this restaurant. The restaurant is closed down. Okay. So I was trying to find a menu because I could tell by... the menu prices, but I couldn't find it. So they're permanently closed. It was called Faith and Flower.
Okay.
Imagine if this band comes marching it. Now, they're in the back room or somewhere. They're in their own room.
Right.
Oh, this is the funny thing I found. I did find a list of rules or something for the restaurant.
Right.
And one is no amplified music allowed.
Huh.
So here comes this band. And he said at one point, Paul grabs a trumpet, starts playing when the Saints come marching in, and the band joins in.
Yeah.
I didn't realize he was friends with Paul that much.
Right.
And it sounds like he's really good friends with Paul. So it's just natural. Like, say if I was in a band, you were in a band, and we were both famous, we would just still be, I'd be Rob, you'd be Jeremy.
Right.
Just like that. Yeah.
Something that caught my attention, and this is just kind of a general thing I've noticed, you don't really hear bad stories about AC/DC when people like drop them because, something, I forget if it was his wife who said, hey, do you want to have dinner with AC/DC? And he's like, AC/DC, the band who kind of stays in the shadows, keeps to themselves, rocks harder than anybody else.
Yeah.
And are like the coolest fucking dudes on the planet. Yeah. And that's what you always hear about AC/DC. You don't hear like these horror stories like the Rolling Stones. You might hear, how they think they're too full of themselves, or Aerosmith was partying too hard, whatever the case may be. Yeah. You don't seem to hear those stories about AC/DC. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. You don't hear that about Bon Jovi. He's a nice guy.
He is a nice guy.
Yeah.
Except for making Gina work at the diner all day. That's not a nice thing to do, but...
So we're on chapter 20, Inspired Yet Again. This chapter was not much going on here. Dave talks about meeting his idol, Little Richard.
Yep.
Basically, Little Richard's son walks up to Dave, and because Dave mentioned how that's one person he always wanted to meet, which is kind of cool, that his son recognized Dave and said, "Hey, you want to meet my dad?" And he's in a limo, and I think Dave said he signed something for him. I don't know. He talks about meeting your heroes. I always heard, never meet your heroes because they could let you down. Jeremy, after I met Gary Busey, that's what I was so excited about meeting. Not that Gary Busey's my hero, but I followed Gary Busey like a long time.
Yeah.
Even on Celebrity Apprentice, he was on there. He just let me down at the Cherry Hill. Oh, which we're going to tomorrow. It'll be the first time back there.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the Gary Busey incident happened the day or two after I was...
Day after you met him. Yeah. After he grabbed your junk, right?
Yeah, I didn't really report it, but Gary did. He also grabbed me. He's a grabber. So, anyway. I couldn't tell if it was Dave or the Foo Fighters induct Rush.
Yep.
I couldn't tell if it was just Dave or...
Well, so you didn't notice it in the book, but listening to it on audiobook, so Dave did the narration, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
He called Neil Peart or something like that, and I was like, is that how you really say it?
Yeah, it's Neil Peart. I just found that out.
Okay, so I guess listening to the audiobook,
I only found it out after he passed away when people were saying his name.
Oh, okay.
Neil Peart. Yeah.
Okay, so that caught me off guard because I'm like, who the hell is Neil Peart? Like, it's Neil Peart.
Well, I always thought Ace, and I still say Ace Frehley. It's Ace Frehley.
Yeah.
Who cares? I don't know.
Yeah. Tomato.
Yeah, right. But we find out that Pat Smear, who I still don't know if that's his real name.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like something else that I'm not going to say. Pat Smear, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in some punk bands, and he was part of Nirvana somehow. But we find out he's a Huey Lewis fan.
Yeah.
Which I like Huey Lewis. It's weird because after I just finished this book a couple days ago, and someone posted Huey Lewis sports album. I think it was today or last night, and people were ragging on the album.
Oh, geez.
Or I never, you get people. I never liked Huey Lewis, and then people are like, oh, that's a great album. That album sucks. I don't know.
I love when Dave.
It's exhausting.
I love when Dave
media.
Grohl. He referred to them as Huey Lewis and the Foos.
Sue wants us to take a 5-minute break because Olive thinks that everyone went to bed. We actually took a little break, we have to say, to get another beer.
Oh, you found one. We both have one.
Yeah. We're drinking Cape May. It's Cape May Brewing Company.
Yeah. New Jersey proud.
Longliner.
We got a variety pack, so we've had a few different ones now.
Yeah, we're on our 8th beer. No, not that many.
Yeah, it's like, 4 or 5 maybe?
4 or 5. Who's counting?
Yeah. Minor details.
Yeah, we're still on chapter 20 here. So he tells a story, which I thought was sweet, of him inviting his friend Jimmy, who passed away the year before.
I was going to say, we may be in 1980 or 2020. Who knows? But
this is 2009.
Okay, there we go.
But he invites Jimmy's mom to meet Neil Diamond, which is her idol.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and he wants to do something nice for her. Jimmy passed away the year before. There's also, Dave's got a busy weekend because he's also playing the Grammys. And she also gets to meet Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
And I don't have it here, but I remember, I think I got the idea that Dave told Paul about his friend Jimmy and that Jimmy's mom was coming. because at the after party, she walks in and Paul walks up to her. She's never met Paul McCartney.
Right.
And he hands her a glass of champagne.
Yeah.
And I forget what he says.
I don't remember the line.
Oh, he's like, here you go, love. Something like that.
Okay, yeah.
And then she meets Neil Diamond. I guess they go see Neil play. And he's wearing this, it said diamond studded shirt. I don't know if they were real diamonds.
Right.
And he literally gives a shirt off his back to Jimmy's mom. So I thought that was pretty cool.
I think it's amazing, too, that, Dave mentions Paul McCartney, I don't know, a dozen times throughout the book.
Yeah.
But every time he's amazed that he's meeting Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like, okay, this is like the 6th time you're mentioning him. Why are you still I mean, I'm not trying to take away from the moment. It's just, at this point, it seems like they're best friends more than him being astonished to see Paul McCartney again.
Yeah. I thought it was cool that I didn't mention in one of the last chapters is when Paul was playing the piano. Mm-hmm. And then the next day he said his daughter was playing like note for note.
Yep.
And how he grew up listening to the Beatles, but his daughter but met a Beatle and was inspired.
Correct.
I mean, that doesn't happen very often.
No, not at all.
So we're on part 5. This is the last part, chapter 21. This is a kind of a strange chapter to bedtime stories with Joan Jett. So Dave's in London with his daughters Harper and Violet, and before they fly back home, he takes them to Harrods, I think it's called.
The casino?
No, it's a huge store, but there's a huge, I guess, a famous toy department. They have like everything there.
Right.
And he tells them to pick out one toy that they can fit in their suitcase. I would imagine something small that they could also fit their clothes in there too. He gives them an hour. And he warns them when 5 minutes is up. Of course, when the hour is up, they can't figure out what they're going to get, but somehow they end up in the Barbie department or Barbie aisle. And Dave just randomly picks a Barbie and says, look, I found mine, or I found my Barbie. And it happens to be a Joan Jett Barbie.
Yeah.
I didn't even know these existed.
Me either.
They go back to the hotel. I get the idea that he did not buy a toy for them. Because they went to play with his Barbie, unless he bought them.
He said they all had one.
Oh, okay.
And
it's still in the box. He actually takes it out of the box, and he shows them a video of Joan for I Love Rock and Roll to let them know that this is actually a real person. A couple months later, I think Joan, they were playing Madison Square Garden. They were asked if they wanted to invite anybody. And this is something weird, is that Dave doesn't know that Pat Smear is friends with Joan Jett. Because he's like, can we get Joan Jett? And they find out Pat Smear has her number or something.
Right.
Just like, yeah. We
knows how to contact her.
Yeah.
She's on speed dial.
Yeah. So they talk after the show about maybe collaborating on something. A couple months later, Joan comes over and Dave's got his studio. Sounds like it's not the house he started in. It sounds like the recording studio is a separate place. There's a guest house. And I think the song, it was Joan Jett's song.
Bad Reputation.
No, it was a new song.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was called Any Weather, I think, something like that.
Oh, okay. I think they performed Bad Reputation.
Yeah. Joan, before she goes to bed, she's on the couch in his house in pajamas. I mentioned this to my business partner, and she thinks I stalk celebrities, and I'm like obsessed, and like, I don't know. That's another thing, but
you like the fanatic?
No, but I know that celebrities are real people. Yeah. I'm not that, I'm not starstruck usually, but just Joan Jett is one of those people where try and find a photo of her wearing pajamas. That's the thing. She's got this image, I think. And I know she's a real person and she wears real clothes sometimes, but not in public, right? So it's just me trying to picture Joan Jett wearing pajamas with the jet black hair. And I don't know. His daughters come in to say goodnight to Joan. And Harper wants Joan to read them a bedtime story, which Joan agrees to. And Joan doesn't have any children, never been married. But I think she still has that instinct, that motherly instinct. And I thought that was great. But I think it's also a cool experience for Violet, who is now 17, to actually say that Joan Jett once read her bedtime story.
Hell yeah.
I mean, maybe she's met her more times now, too. That's that chapter. And then chapter 22, the daddy-daughter dance. Now, this chapter has an incredible story in it. What I mentioned before about maybe Dave overcompensating.
Well, maybe he ate the fish on the airplane. That was the first problem.
No, but the whole thing, just overcompensating.
Yeah.
I really think he should have gotten an award for Father of the Year.
Yeah. So
Dave is always attended his younger daughter's, his older daughter's, daddy-daughter dance. Now, his younger daughter, he gets a call. He's in Australia. Now, I take it they were probably only had a couple shows to go. It sounds like the end of their tour in Australia. And he gets a call that his youngest daughter needs him to be at the daddy-daughter dance. Like I said before, it's got to be really hard to juggle family, touring, and let alone having to be somewhere across the country in a couple days to do some family thing. But Dave actually somehow gets his manager or his tour manager to reschedule the show, and it's in Perth. They actually move the show a couple days so he can be at the dance. Him and Gus, who I had to figure out is actually his tour manager.
Okay.
First, I thought it was his manager. They get on a plane right after they're performing a show, but right after the last note plays, they're like, get out of there. They're on the plane. I also figured out that Dave mentions about getting like 4 hours sleep so he did get some sleep, maybe on the plane too. It's a long plane ride. So he goes to the dance. He takes some photos, I guess, with both his daughters, I think, were there.
Right.
And then they kind of seem, they're with their friends and everything. And he has something to eat. And he tells them, Daddy's got to go. And they're like, okay, bye.
Yeah.
He gets on the plane and he thinks he has food poisoning. So imagine being trapped on a plane, nowhere to go, with gastrointestinal problems, let alone food poisoning.
Yeah.
Now he says something which I find it hard to believe, that he's incapable of vomiting.
Even though he's done it 3 times in the past.
Yeah. I don't know. It's almost like, for me, for a lot of people, is to be confined or to be trapped. Like, you see some people, like in these horror movies, like climbing through, like in a cave, or like you don't have anywhere to go.
Right.
That's almost like being on a plane for me, and let alone being sick, coming out both ends.
Yeah.
The bathroom's not always open.
No.
So that's got to be really bad. There's this guy, Eddie Deason.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Who played Eugene in Grease. I met him a couple weeks ago.
He was in Critters too.
Yeah.
Mandark and Dexter's Laboratory. Sorry.
So I'm friends with him on Facebook, which a lot of people are. Really nice guy. He's very transparent. He went to a restaurant. This has something to do with it, but he went to a restaurant the other, and he was joking. Nobody there, and this is real, nobody there knew the Heimlich. He's already had heart surgery, like heart attack. Thought he was going to die. And somehow whatever was in his throat dislodged, but he said he vomited in the freaking middle of the restaurant. So that's what I was thinking of, just in a public place.
Jeez.
My worst nightmare. Especially when you're famous, too.
Yeah. He's
funny because he posted a picture of the waitress trying to give him the Heimlich. He's like, this is right before I thought I was going to die, or something like that. Anyway. Yeah, so Dave's on the plane. He thinks he has, food poisoning, but he has a show to do. And I think it's the show that I think they postponed. But he gets to the venue and there's a doctor there. I think his bandmates are told that he's not feeling well, but they go back there and he's laying there with an IV.
Right.
He ends up doing the show. But it's amazing to me that he got on a plane from Australia, went to just to go to this dance for like an hour or two, and then flies back. That's
well, and he went into, this was when, what was it, E. coli? Is that what it was called? Was big. So he was worried that he wasn't even going to be able to get off of the plane.
Ebola? Or?
Oh, yeah, Ebola, something like that. I don't remember what it was, but they got this checklist, and it's like, nauseous, check, headaches, check, stomach pain, check. Like, he had every symptom possible.
Yeah, I think he kind of lied on that.
I'm assuming he did.
He said he didn't want to be in a room with other people with the actual disease.
Right.
And get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So his tour manager, that's when he got the IV, told him, like, lay down, so he slept at the venue or whatever.
Yeah. But I'm amazed at the stamina he had to do this in such a short amount of time, to play a show, get on the plane, come back, and then have to play a show.
Yeah.
So now we're on chapter 23 is the wisdom of Violet. Not much going on in this one either, but Dave talks about performing the song Blackbird.
That's right.
For Student Entertainment Day with Violet. Now, these school functions are kind of now everywhere a celebration of talent. They used to have talent night.
Yeah.
And I think, would give out prizes maybe, or first, second, third. But come on, you bring your dad, who happens to be Dave Grohl,
right,
to play guitar. And apparently Violet could really sing, even at this point. But I think it's unfair if they were judging, because they said they got a standing ovation. You know, other people's dads are like some poor schlubs, you know, working at a car wash or McDonald's. They're not like rock stars. So this is it's the first time Violet sings in public. And of course she's by now has sang with Foo Fighters. Mm-hmm. And on her own. Now, I did look her up on Apple Music, and she has one single.
Okay.
I thought maybe she'd have an album or two, but she doesn't. Maybe someday. Now, the irony of this is that Dave gets an invitation to sing at the Academy Awards.
Yeah.
And the song is Blackbird. I don't know how soon after it is. Now, it's the Memoriam segment. Now, he hesitates doing it, but his daughter Violet says, when he tells her, he says, well, you're going to do it right. I mean, you did it at the Student Entertainment Day. Mm-hmm. Like encouraging her dad,
right,
who's played at the White House and all kinds of things.
In front of millions of people.
So he knew he couldn't refuse to do it. He goes to a boutique to get, I guess, a suit. And the girl that's helping him with the suit says to him, we've actually met before.
Oh, this was wild.
And this is almost like the wallet story.
Yep.
A little bit. And it turns out she was the little girl in the video for Heart Shaped Box, who he hasn't seen since the video.
Right.
I don't know how young she was then. And it's not a very exciting chapter, but that's a pretty cool incident. So we're on the last chapter here. Chapter 24, conclusion, another step in the crosswalk. And basically Dave is reminiscing about all the things and people that kind of fell into place that got him where he is now.
Yep.
And I was surprised he didn't mention Legos, which he referenced earlier in the book. You know, all the pieces fitting together perfectly. Right. He does say some nice things about Kurt and also his childhood friend Jimmy, his mom, I think, you know, other people in his life. So that's basically the book. And this is my conclusion. Jeremy agrees with some of this stuff too. Well, first of all, this book was written in 2020 during COVID. Mm-hmm. I think I mentioned that maybe, I don't know if I mentioned it on the podcast, maybe he didn't have enough time to finish. Maybe there were other chapters he wanted to write, or maybe expand on the chapters. And you know, once things started getting back to normal, he was starting to play shows and couldn't dedicate any time to more writing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, Taylor Hawkins was still alive when this book was written. Otherwise, I'm positive there would have been a couple chapters at least on Taylor.
Yeah, because he did mention at one time that it was like a love at first sight, their friendship that they had.
Yeah. Yeah, he did a lot of kind of a bromance with Taylor.
Yeah.
Probably, like the brother he never had or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the funniest thing is him describing this book. This is on page 374. And it's in the acknowledgement chapter, which is actually the last chapter.
Yep.
And Jeremy, I know, will agree with this. Without the amazing people at Day Street HarperCollins, this almost 400-page beast, never would have made it into your hands. So I take it Dave has not read many books. War and Peace, Jeremy, by Leo Tolstoy, is a beast at 1,232 pages.
Yeah.
The Stand, the uncut version. Now, Jeremy had just listened to The Stand on audio. Might have been the regular one.
It was the uncut one.
Oh, it was?
Yes.
It's 1,153 pages.
And it was long. It was over 50 hours.
So this book is 376 pages. There are blank pages and title pages and photos, photos on the audiobook.
Right.
That actually were counted as the pages.
Okay.
Okay. I had figured that at least 50 or more were like blank title. So now we're down to 324 pages of actual information. Mm-hmm. It's not like a 200-page book. I enjoyed the book. I can't say it's one of the best biographies I've read because I've read a lot better.
Yeah.
And like we said, the book goes back and forth a lot. It would have been nice to have some dates. I had to look up, like I said, certain events to figure out what year it was. I mean, if you're mentioning the Grammy Awards, you could at least put at the 2009 Grammy. You can put the 2009 in there. Could have added a couple pages in there. Yeah, I won't go into Nirvana again, like I said, with that. And I would have liked more detail as to the recording and writing of certain songs. We got none of this. Just things that stood out to Dave.
Right.
And, what stood out to him. I like biographies to start from beginning and end.
Yeah.
At the present. I mean, it's okay to start the book out like he did with, the present, because I've seen a lot of those, and then start at the beginning.
Yep.
It wasn't too hard for me to follow along, though. I have here, it wasn't like he threw the manuscript in the air and then put it back together in that order.
Right.
It wasn't that jumbled, but overall, I like the book. And what are your, I know we talked about some of the things, but anything else about the book?
Yeah, no, similar to what you said. The timeline was a little kind of all over the place. It was at times a little difficult to follow along with, and you kind of had to piece it together.
Yeah.
But, I think we talked about it off the podcast. Almost seemed like this was written as if he was a little guarded.
Yeah.
So he told us some stuff, but didn't fully share everything, maybe.
Yeah.
So some of those family stories, some of those, meeting other band stories, some of those audition type stories felt like they were maybe 60 or 70% of the story and not quite 100% of what actually happened.
I think he wanted to be the nice guy that we...
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure he's a nice guy. And probably in his real life, if he finds out the secret about someone, he probably doesn't tell anyone. I'm sure he saw Kurt doing drugs. Do we want to know that? Maybe not. I think a 10-year-old could read this book, which is great. I think any kid could read this book. I don't know if the Brian Johnson had a couple things, maybe more than a couple, questionable, or...
I really like that one, but I think it's because of how much detail he went into.
Yeah.
Talking about some of his struggles and, issues that he had and things he had to overcome to end up getting where he got.
I think even like with movies, or I think biographies it'd be nice if books had ratings. Think about it. Books don't really, sometimes they'll put an age for the children's books. Think about it.
Right. Like
ages, I don't know, 10 to 15 or so. I don't know. But think about it. If this book had a G rating, maybe let your younger kid read it. Like the Chuck Negron book, right? Should have an R rating. You don't know until you get into it.
Right.
So this was a good, pretty much wholesome book.
And I think some of my criticism, I'm a big fan of the Foo Fighters. I'm a big fan of Nirvana. So I've always enjoyed Dave Grohl as a musician. And I think I wanted more as a fan.
Yeah.
And that's a little unfair sometimes, too. Maybe I went in with higher expectations and it didn't necessarily deliver to my expectations. But that doesn't mean the book itself was bad. I did enjoy reading it.
Yeah.
I did enjoy learning more about, Dave Grohl, the person, Dave Grohl, the musician, Dave Grohl, the journeyman. Just kind of some of those adventures.
Family man.
Yeah.
And, yeah. I mean, I think even though it, shouldn't have, which it wasn't a Nirvana book, it should have been a Foo Fighter book. It should have been more.
It should have been a Scream book.
Yeah.
There was more Scream than Nirvana.
I know. Yeah. And the one last thing is, I've never seen a book that had photos and never referenced anything about the photo. There's nothing underneath the photo. There's nothing in the back of the book that tells you when it was taken, who the people are in the photo. You can kind of figure out who they are, but
interesting.
Yeah. There's just the photo. There's just photos. It almost seems like it was hurried.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it was a #1 like New York Times bestseller, but I think
everything
anyone who's fairly famous gets on that list. So.
I agree.
Yeah. So I guess that does it. I recommend reading it, especially if you're a Dave Grohl fan. If you're a Nirvana fan and you're looking for, Nirvana stuff, you're going to be disappointed. But it's about Dave's life and like I said, things that stood out to him. I'd recommend reading it. So
I would check it out at least once.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to email us anything, your thoughts on podcast, any suggestions, as with our regular podcast, if you're in a band, you have any recordings last couple of years, you can email us at nogoodmusicpodcast@gmail.com. Give it a listen. May include you in the give it a listen segment. So thanks for listening, everybody. And like I said, Matt will be back with me next month. Jeremy's got some autograph. April's a big autograph month.
It is. And then we've got a concert in May that I'm looking forward to.
Oh, is that Wolfgang?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to see Mammoth.
Yep. It'll be our second time.
So remember, everyone, turn off that TV.
And turn up the music.
You've been listening to No Good Music, intro and exit music by the band 99%. Today's show is produced and edited by Rob J. Lilly and recorded at the Did You Say 7 Studios in Washington, New Jersey. You can find No Good Music on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, Pandora, and almost anywhere you listen to podcasts.